A billionaire walked through the door of his Bel-Air mansion after weeks away. The sight before him brought him to his knees. His 8-year-old daughter with Down syndrome was on the pristine, white marble floor, gently lapping up spilled milk with her tongue like a frightened animal. The house gleamed like something from a magazine. Perfect, spotless, silent, but inside that perfection, a little girl named Emma lived in terror every single day. Robert Morgan built empires worth billions. In his cream-colored suits, he commanded boardrooms across America. But he had no idea what was happening in his own home. His new wife, Victoria Hayes, blonde, beautiful, always dressed in striking red, had turned their mansion into a prison of rules Emma could never understand. No mess. No noise. No mistakes. And tonight? No dinner. The spilled milk pooled across the cold floor. Emma, starving and trembling in her bright blue dress, bent down. Her small tongue touched the white liquid. She whispered to herself over and over, "Be clean. Mama likes clean." Robert stood frozen. His leather briefcase fell from his hand, hitting the floor with a thud that echoed through the empty house. Have you ever seen something that shattered your entire world in one moment? The pristine white mansion perched high in the hills of Bel-Air gleamed like a crown jewel against the California sky. Every morning, sunlight struck the towering windows, reflecting off the perfectly manicured gardens where landscapers worked in quiet precision. Inside, Robert Morgan began each day with a cup of black coffee and a schedule packed so tightly, there was barely room to breathe. At 45, he owned everything others only dreamed of: a fortune built from the ground up, a financial empire that stretched across 3 continents, and a reputation that commanded respect in every boardroom from Los Angeles to New York. His cream-colored suits were custom-tailored. His watches cost more than most people's homes. His life looked perfect from the outside, but there was something he never confessed to anyone. Inside that same pristine house, what he feared most were the silent mornings. That silence usually meant Emma, his daughter, was somewhere being still in a way children should never have to be. Emma was 8 years old. She had slightly almond-shaped eyes and a small smile that was always present, even when there was no one around to smile at. She had Down syndrome. She spoke slowly, often repeating herself in a soft voice that sometimes stopped mid-sentence, as if she were counting her own breaths. Does anyone in your life have special needs? How do you make sure they feel loved every single day? Whenever she was alone in her room, Emma lined up her toys meticulously, counting each object before starting over again. Those simple sounds, 1, 2, 3, were the only things that brought any life to the house on the days Robert wasn't there. After his wife Sarah died from complications during childbirth, Robert isolated himself from the outside world. He used work as a shield against the gaping emptiness. He hired nurses, tutors, even specially trained staff to care for Emma, but he rarely made it home for dinner. To his employees, he was the man who set the rules. To his daughter, he was a fleeting image in a framed photo on the wall. The only person who truly understood Emma was Martha, the loyal housekeeper of the Morgan family. She knew how to coax the girl into eating, how to make her laugh, and could tell when she was starting to feel anxious just by watching the circular movements of her hands. Every time Robert asked Martha about Emma, she simply said, "She just needs time, Mr. Morgan." But time was the one thing Robert never seemed to have. Everything changed when Victoria Hayes arrived, 35 years old, blonde hair that caught the light like spun gold, a figure that turned heads everywhere she went. Victoria had a background in public relations and a way of speaking that convinced anyone that everything under her supervision would become more orderly and elegant. In the eyes of Los Angeles high society, Robert had found his perfect match. The press called them the power couple of the year. Have you ever met someone who seemed perfect on the surface but turned out to be completely different underneath? As for Emma, every time she heard the adults mention new mama, she simply stared at her shoes, softly repeating the words, "New mama." The day Victoria moved into the mansion, the house seemed to light up. She changed the curtains, replaced all the furniture, and reorganized Emma's daily routine. In the morning, she chose the girl's clothes. In the afternoon, she supervised her study time. At night, she read her bedtime stories. Robert watched all this, believing Emma finally had someone who truly cared. He smiled seeing them sitting together on the sofa, not noticing that Emma gripped the hem of her blue dress until her knuckles turned white. For the first few weeks, things seemed fine. But one afternoon while Robert was away on business, Emma accidentally knocked over a glass of orange juice onto the new leather armchair. The liquid dripped onto the floor, soaking into the carpet fibers. Victoria walked in. Her eyes examined the stain. Her hands clenched into fists. She approached the child, her voice low and sharp. "No mess. You have to be perfect." Emma trembled, her lips murmuring the two words like a mantra. Be perfect. Be perfect. From that day forward, whenever Victoria said perfect, Emma stopped smiling. She sat motionless like a statue, afraid to touch anything. Martha began noticing the changes. The girl spoke less. She no longer counted aloud or hummed softly to herself. Her eyes, once curious, now often avoided contact when someone approached. Once, Martha told Robert that something wasn't right, that Emma seemed frightened. Robert put down his newspaper, sighed and said, "Victoria is strict. Children need discipline." He said it, and forgot about it, the way busy people often forget things they'd rather not think about. When was the last time you really listened to a warning from someone who cared? What happened? A month later, Victoria announced that Martha was no longer compatible with the household standards, and Robert didn't ask why. The day she left, Emma clung to Martha's sleeve, staring at the floor, saying softly, "Martha, go where? Emma, be good." Martha just knelt down, kissed the girl's forehead, leaving behind a faint scent of lavender perfume like a sad memory. That night, Robert flew to San Francisco. In the empty house, the only sound was the ticking of the clock. Victoria was reading a magazine in the living room, lights on but cold. Upstairs, Emma clutched her old rag doll tightly, whispering the phrase, be good," until she fell asleep. The next morning, Victoria woke early and went down to the kitchen, finding Emma sitting on a low stool, clutching the remains of a cookie. The girl took tiny bites, trying not to make any noise. Victoria approached, gathered all the cookies, and placed the tin on a high shelf. "You only eat when I allow it." Emma lowered her head, placed the remaining piece of cookie on the table, and said nothing. Victoria glanced around the spotlessly clean kitchen, then walked out, her heels marking a steady rhythm on the hardwood floor. Emma remained motionless for a long time. She looked up at the cookie tin on the shelf, her eyes reflecting the light from the range hood. Her small hands lifted slightly, then fell back onto the table. The cookie piece crumbled into 3 fragments. She leaned down to pick them up, gathering them together, counting internally. 1, 2, 3. But the third piece crumbled in her grip, making her stop. The room was so quiet she could hear the wind howling outside the window. If you were Emma's neighbor and heard this happening, what would you do? She sat on the floor, her back against the cabinet, her hands resting on her knees. Her stomach growled softly, a silent reminder. Outside, the sound of Victoria's car pulling out of the driveway faded away. Emma tilted her head, looking at the wall clock, the second hand advancing in small increments, and began counting with it. 1, 2, 3. The White House still gleamed like something out of a magazine, everything orderly to the point of perfection. But within that perfection, there was no sound of a child living. Since Victoria officially became Mrs. Morgan, the mansion on the hill changed down to the smallest detail. Every morning, the clicking of her heels echoed constantly across the hardwood floors, mixing with the strong scent of her expensive perfume and the sharp smell of floor cleaner. She had taped a white paper to the refrigerator with large red letters proclaiming, "New house rules. Keep the house spotless. Stay organized. Learn to be a normal girl." Emma didn't fully understand all the words, but she memorized the way Victoria dictated them, every morning when the clock struck 7. She had to fold her blanket perfectly straight, brush her hair neatly, and wash her face without splashing water in the sink. If a single strand of hair was found on the floor, Victoria would pick it up, place it in front of her, and command, "Do it again." The girl never asked why. She just tilted her head slightly, her hands trembling as she repeated each action. Victoria claimed that discipline was love, and that only when she was spotless and quiet could Emma learn to live like a normal person. She called this order therapy. Have you ever been made to feel like you weren't good enough just for being yourself? Emma only caught a few words, but each one made her heart shrink. Whenever she accidentally made a mistake, her food portion was reduced, or she had to stand motionless in the corner until Victoria deemed it sufficient. Robert was frequently absent. His schedule was packed with meetings in New York, Chicago, and Boston. Every night he called home via video, seeing Victoria smiling next to the brightly lit dining table. He'd ask, "Has Emma been good?" And Victoria would invariably respond, "Perfectly. She's making great progress." On the other side of the line, he'd sigh in relief, assuming everything at home was fine. He didn't see Emma's deeply shadowed eyes, her messy hair, or her dry, cracked lips. Alicia, the newly hired young housekeeper, began noticing the strange atmosphere. She often saw Emma sitting in front of the refrigerator, staring at the white door as if something special were inside. One morning, Alicia opened the refrigerator only to find a few cans of soda and a carton of milk nearly expired. Victoria ate separately, and Emma's portion was typically a bowl of watery oatmeal or cold bread. Alicia tried hiding a small cookie in the girl's napkin. Emma took it, said nothing, but counted with her fingers. 1, 2, 3. Then she whispered, "Thank you, Mama. Thank you, Daddy." The brief expression moved Alicia to tears. If you saw a child being treated this way, would you have the courage to speak up? What would you say? On the days Robert was scheduled to return, Victoria was always busier than usual. She'd call workers to polish the floors, adjust the curtains, and clean the photo frames until everything sparkled. Emma was dressed in a new outfit, holding a drawing she colored herself. Before he walked through the door, Victoria would lean down, wipe Emma's small hands clean, and whisper, "Smile. Don't make Daddy sad." When Robert arrived, the whole house lit up. He'd ruffle his daughter's hair, praising her drawing as beautiful. But minutes later, his phone would ring. He'd step away from the table, retreating to his study, leaving Emma standing there, still holding the drawing. Victoria would follow him, discussing social schedules and company matters. Emma watched them disappear down the hallway, her expression blank. The drawing remained in her hand, a picture of 3 people holding hands, but the father in the drawing was only half finished. That night, Robert received an urgent call from the office. He packed his suitcase so quickly he didn't have time for dinner. Before leaving, he leaned down, kissed his daughter's forehead, and advised, "Listen to your mama, okay?" Emma nodded, her hands clasped together, but there was no confidence in her eyes. She watched the door close, heard the distant sound of the engine, then fell silent. When the house was left to just the 2 women, Victoria opened the liquor cabinet. She signaled to Alicia to prepare a small reception. "Invite some of my friends," she said. "It's been too quiet in this house for too long." Alicia busied herself with preparations: roasted meats, buttered bread, wine, cheese boards, fresh fruit, and dips. The savory smells permeated the house, mixing with the sound of laughter as guests arrived. Women in glittering dresses gathered around the long table, raising their wine glasses in celebration. Upstairs, Emma sat by the window, listening to the commotion below. Her stomach growled repeatedly, but she didn't dare go down to the kitchen. When Alicia brought up a tray of snacks for Victoria's inspection, Victoria pointed and said, "No need to bring the child a portion tonight. She needs to learn to be good." The words were chilling, leaving Alicia paralyzed. She almost spoke, but Victoria had already turned away, laughing with her guests. What would you have done in Alicia's position? Would you risk your job to help an innocent child? Upstairs, Emma opened her drawer to find her rag doll, hugging it against her chest. The lights from the party room cast flickering, unfamiliar streaks of light across the ceiling. She curled up, listening to the adult chatter and laughter, the loud clinking of glasses, and music mixed with the aroma of roasted meat and wine. Her stomach churned. Her breathing became shallow and shaky. She closed her eyes, reaching to touch her shirt, murmuring, "Daddy, Emma, be good." Then she repeated it softer and softer. The bedroom clock ticked, each beat slow and prolonged. Like the ache of hunger. Downstairs, wine was poured into glasses. Silverware clinked. Laughter erupted late into the night. Every time a glass chimed, Emma pressed her doll tighter against her stomach, which churned in waves. When the clock struck midnight, the guests began leaving. Alicia collected plates while Victoria reclined on the sofa, eyes half closed, a faint smile still drawn on her lips. The dining table was still loaded with leftovers, the aromas floating through the air. Upstairs in the dark room, Emma remained still, awake. She watched the party room light filtering through the door crack, fading like a dying flame. The last clinking of glasses from below echoed, mixing with the lingering music. Emma tilted her head subtly, clutching her worn doll to her stomach again, squeezing against the hunger. The Morgan house after midnight was still brilliantly lit, like an elegant restaurant just after closing. Yellow light from the living room spilled through the large windows, illuminating traces of spilled wine on the table. The smell of roasted meat, cheese, and wine combined into a heavy aroma that saturated the air. The intermittent laughter of the few remaining guests faded between the creaks of footsteps on the hardwood floor. "Hello." "Thanks for coming," Victoria said, glass in hand. Her lips still curved despite her clouded eyes. "We should do this again soon." A woman in a blue dress responded with a half smile. "You always know how to make everyone feel small next to your perfection, Vale." Victoria laughed softly, the smell of wine on her breath. "Perfection is a choice, darling, not luck." Alicia moved about, collecting dirty dishes and wiping down the table. She kept her head low as she passed, not daring to look at her employer. When the last guest left, all that remained was Victoria's weak, labored breathing as she lay on the sofa. Her red dress stained with wine, her head tilted, hair falling over her shoulder. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Share your story if you're comfortable. Upstairs, Emma opened her eyes. Hunger had woken her for the third time that night. She heard the wind outside the window, the distant sound of a glass falling, and the strong aroma of leftover food seeping through the door crack. She sat up, clutching her stomach, murmuring, 1, 2, 3. "Emma, be good." "Emma can eat now?" "No." No one answered. She opened her bedroom door and tiptoed into the hallway. Each step was light, as if she feared the floor would creak. Her shadow stretched along the wall, trembling under the dim hallway light. Downstairs, a small light was still on in the kitchen. Emma walked barefoot, her hand gripping the wooden banister. The smell of milk and leftover food tightened her throat. She opened the refrigerator. The burst of cold air sent shivers across her skin. Inside, a carton of milk sat half full, chilled, leaving traces of water on the glass shelf. She pulled it out and found a small glass on the counter. Her trembling hand made the carton spout slip, and a stream of white milk spilled onto the floor. The sound of dripping echoed through the silent kitchen. Emma froze, her eyes wide. She stared at the patch of milk spreading like a small cloud across the shiny tile floor. No. Spill," she whispered, her lips trembling. Her stomach growled louder. She knelt down, staring at the drops of milk separating under the dim light. Her hand reached out tentatively to touch the floor, then stopped, her eyes scanning around as if fearing she'd be caught. Finally, she leaned down and tasted the first drops of milk with her tongue. It was cold, creamy, and slightly sweet. She licked again, her fingers gripping the hem of her nightshirt. Tears fell and mixed with the milk. "Emma, clean." "Mama like clean," she murmured, her voice breaking, licking and cleaning at the same time. "Close your eyes for just a moment." Can you imagine what this little girl is feeling right now? She didn't notice that the kitchen door was still open. The hallway light stretched her shadow across the floor, small and distorted. The sound of high heels echoed softly, slow and heavy. Victoria stumbled forward, phone in hand, the screen light reflecting off her wine-flushed face. She stopped at the threshold, staring at the scene before her. A girl kneeling, bent over the floor, white milk stained around her mouth. Emma looked up. Her eyes met Victoria's, frightened, like a small creature caught in the act. I clean. I spill, she stammered, her voice barely a breath. Victoria stood motionless for a few seconds, saying nothing. Then she tossed her phone onto the kitchen counter with a dry, harsh clatter. Whatever, she muttered dryly, walking past. Her dress brushed the floor before she collapsed onto a nearby sofa, the strong smell of wine enveloping her. Emma looked around, then crawled to grab a small towel, wiping every trace of milk. Clean now. Emma, clean now, she repeated to herself slowly, steadily. The living room clock chimed 12 dry, sharp notes. Outside, the early morning wind whistled through the windows, bringing a chill. At the door, car headlights swept a long beam of light across the paved driveway. Robert Morgan had returned earlier than expected. He turned off the engine and entered the foyer, his trench coat still over his shoulder. In his mind, he still had a list of unfinished work. But his steps slowed when he heard a faint noise from the kitchen, like the sound of a glass hitting the floor, or someone whispering. He left his briefcase and followed the sound. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, letting out a ray of white light. Emma? He called, his voice soft. No answer. When he entered, he froze. The scene before him cut off his breath. His daughter was kneeling on the floor, her hair disheveled, covering half her face, lapping up the spilled milk. Meanwhile, his second wife lay slumped on the sofa behind her, eyes closed, her red dress stained with wine. The briefcase slipped from Robert's hand and hit the floor with a loud thud. The milk continued spreading near his polished leather shoes, small droplets mixing with the kitchen lamp's light. What would be running through your mind if this was your child? Take a second and really think about it. Robert stood motionless in the kitchen, his breathing ragged. The hallway light projected at angles across the polished tile floor, reflecting the small, bent figure. The milk spread in trails, mixing with his daughter's tired breathing. Everything seemed to move slow or heavy, so silent he could distinctly hear the beating of his own heart. When the briefcase hit the floor, the dry sound startled Emma. She flinched, her eyes darting quickly, trembling violently like a young bird seeking shelter. Robert called softly. Emma? What are you doing? No answer. The girl just clutched the empty glass. Milk residue still stuck to her mouth. Her eyes were sunken, filled with absolute terror. He crouched down, touching her shoulder. She instantly pulled away, her lips stuttering. I clean. Milk spill. Mama said. Has to be clean. Robert went rigid. Every word the girl said pierced his heart. In that moment, he didn't just see a frightened child. He saw the result of years of abandoning her, believing money could substitute for affection. He lifted the girl into his arms. Emma's body was so light it alarmed him. She struggled briefly, then surrendered, resting her head on his shoulder. Her weak breath brushed his neck. On the sofa, Victoria stirred, her voice hoarse. When did you get back? Robert didn't answer. He simply looked at the woman he once loved, lying in the middle of the messy room. The smell of wine and perfume intertwined. He carried his daughter upstairs, walking slowly but firmly, as if afraid to wake something fragile that had just broken inside his heart. Emma's room was small. Her rag doll still sat on the nightstand, the blanket folded messily. He found a towel, wiped the milk residue from her mouth, and tucked her into bed. She murmured in her sleep, Emma, clean. Mama like clean. Robert paused, his hand gripping the edge of the bed. His chest tightened until it was hard to breathe. He leaned down and said softly, No, my love. Emma doesn't have to be afraid anymore. Emma didn't hear. She was trapped in a restless dream, her breathing shallow. He sat by the bed for a long time, his eyes never leaving his daughter's small, thin face. Every feature reminded him of Sarah, his late wife, whom he'd never allowed himself to grieve for. Now, looking at the daughter who shared her face, he finally felt the cost of running from pain. When was the last time you sat with someone you love and just stayed? No phone, no distractions, just presence. Leaving the room, he returned to the kitchen. On the floor, the milk traces had dried into faint white lines. He picked up the shards of the broken glass, threw them in the trash, then looked up. The house was terribly perfect, shiny and clean but devoid of human warmth. He sat across from Victoria. She opened her eyes, blinking repeatedly, her head throbbing. "Why are you staring at me?" She frowned, rubbing her forehead. "I'm just trying to understand," Robert said slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor. "How a person could sleep soundly when my daughter was starving upstairs." Victoria scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. She's just sensitive. You always think she's different, that's why you spoil her too much." Robert didn't respond. He just looked at her for a long time. That look made Victoria turn away. Her voice softened. "I just wanted her to learn to be organized." He stood up without saying more. Morning came. Sunlight filtered through the windows into the dining room. Victoria wore a silk robe, a cup of coffee in hand. Trying to regain her composure, Alicia cleaned the table, glancing at Robert, who sat silently at the head of the table, his eyes fixed on the window, his face rigid as a statue. Emma was still upstairs, her breathing rough. Alicia quietly brought a bowl of oatmeal and placed it by the bed. She noticed the small blue veins clearly visible on Emma's arm. "My God," she thought. "The child is nothing but a ghost." Robert called the family doctor. When the middle-aged man arrived with his medical bag, the house fell into uncomfortable silence. The doctor checked Emma's heartbeat, examined her skin, then spoke softly. "The child is suffering from severe nutritional deficiency. There are signs of malnutrition and prolonged anxiety." He paused, looking at Robert. "The care protocol needs to be adjusted immediately." Robert didn't respond. He just lowered his head, his hands tightly clasped. The word malnutrition echoed in his ears like clashing metal. If you were Robert's friend, what would you tell him right now? After the doctor left, Robert sat for a long time. Victoria stood nearby, her voice softer than usual. "Are you blaming me? You were never here." "I was just trying to..." "It's not enough," Robert interrupted without looking at her. He stood and walked out of the dining room. The sound of his shoes hitting the floor echoed heavily through the hallway. Victoria called after him. "Where are you going?" Robert stopped without turning around. "To the place I should have been all along." He opened Emma's bedroom door. Morning light spilled across his little daughter's sleeping face. The room that morning was bathed in soft sunlight. Robert sat on the edge of Emma's bed, watching her sleep. Every weak breath she took echoed in his mind like an accusation. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Victoria entered with coffee, her perfume filling the room. "How is she?" she asked, feigning concern. Robert didn't respond. "Maybe," Victoria continued, "it would be better if you considered a specialized center. She'd fit in better there." He looked up sharply. "Fit in better? For whom?" "Have you ever heard someone justify cruelty with excuses?" At noon, Robert descended the stairs. The house gleamed cold and perfect. Alicia stood at the sink, trembling. "How was Emma fed while I was away?" he asked quietly. Alicia's voice broke. She said, "The girl had to eat little. Once just milk and cold oatmeal all day. I was afraid of losing my job." Robert closed his eyes. Victoria appeared behind them. "Have you eaten? I was about to order lunch." "No need," Robert said, ice in his voice. "Pack your belongings. Today." "What would you choose, someone you thought you loved or your own child?" Victoria's face went pale. "You don't mean that." "Yes, I do." He signed divorce papers. You wanted the position, not a family. Minutes later, her heels echoed down the hallway. The door slammed shut final as a gavel. After Victoria left, silence filled the house. No clicking heels. No sharp perfume. Just the clock ticking and wind through the trees. Robert stood alone in the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator nearly empty except for milk and stale cookies. He picked up the milk carton, his hand trembling. The memories crashed over him. Emma on the floor. Milk around her mouth. Her frightened eyes. When did you realize you'd failed at something that truly mattered? Sir, Alicia whispered. The girl is awake. Upstairs, Emma ran to the window. Victoria's car was leaving. Down below, Robert stood motionless in the garden. Hands in his pockets. Emma didn't understand what was happening, only that her father wasn't leaving with Victoria. For the first time, silence wasn't order. It was a verdict on all who'd forgotten how to love. The first morning alone, Robert woke early. Emma sat in the corner, knees pulled up. When he opened the cabinet for milk, she flinched. He understood. This kitchen was a place of fear. He poured milk into a glass, placed it on the table, and sat beside her in silence. Minutes passed. Slowly, Emma reached for the glass and drank. Their eyes met, briefly shy, curious. Very good, Emma, he whispered. When did you last just sit with someone without trying to fix them? The next day, he moved his desk to the living room window. During breaks, he'd read stories aloud. Emma listened from across the room, her doll in hand. He called a child psychologist. She needs security more than instructions, the woman said. Let her choose. Let it happen naturally. Robert nodded. For the first time, he was learning to be a father. He let Emma choose her clothes, her food, her bedtime. He woke early to cook. Afternoons, they watered plants together. Every time Emma laughed, he wrote it in a small journal, a record of a heart coming back to life. What small thing could you do today to show love without words? One afternoon, Emma appeared with a watering can, looking at him hesitantly. I help. Can I? Robert crouched, took her hand, and together they lifted the can. Water sparkled over rose petals. Emma's smile was crooked but radiant. That night, he read her a bedtime story. She leaned against his shoulder. Daddy Bear come home? She asked softly. Yes, sweetheart. Because his mama left a light on. Emma whispered. Emma have light too? Robert's throat tightened. He stroked her head gently. When the story ended, she tugged his sleeve. Daddy stay? Just little bit? He sat back down. She rested her head on his shoulder, breathing evening out. Affection wasn't about doing things. It was about staying. If you could change one moment with someone you love, what would it be? Late that night, Robert sat outside her door, journal in lap. He wrote, Day 1. Learning to be a father again. Outside, Bel Air wind carried the scent of earth and milk. This journey wouldn't be easy. But he'd never abandon it again. 3 months later, the house glowed with new life. Sunlight poured through windows. The smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. Every morning, father and daughter ate breakfast on the patio. Toast, eggs, milk, simple, complete. Emma was healthier. Her cheeks rosy. Her eyes bright. What's the most meaningful breakfast you've ever had? Linda, the special education teacher, came daily. Robert sat beside Emma, noting every improvement. What do you most want Emma to learn? Linda asked once. Robert looked at his daughter coloring. But even if she's different, she's loved. In the garden, Emma counted roses. 1, 2, 3. Water splashed her clothes. She laughed. Robert built a wooden swing under the big tree. When finished, Emma ran to it, swinging gently, laughter soft as a breeze. What simple moment brought you unexpected joy recently? At his desk that night, Robert wrote, Day 94. She smiled without hesitation. In Emma's room, she taped a new drawing to the wall, 3 people holding hands, a red heart in the center. Mama. Daddy. Emma. But in the corner, A vague silhouette in a red dress. Do children ever truly forget those who hurt them? Robert saw the drawing when turning off lights. The red-dressed figure confused him. He touched the paper gently, then left. Outside, the porch light illuminated the path. A black sedan approached. Victoria had returned. 3 months absent, Victoria now stood at the door, hairstyled, makeup subtle, briefcase in hand. "We need to discuss assets and custody," she said coolly. Robert let her in. Emma's drawing hung on the wall. "Legally," Victoria continued, "I was Emma's guardian." "That girl needs better resources. Specialized centers. If someone tried to take your child using legal language, what would you say?" "What did you just say?" Robert's eyes turned glacial. Small footsteps on the stairs. Emma froze, seeing Victoria. Her face went pale. Victoria's hand trembled. "Look, she remembers me." Robert looked at his trembling daughter. "Yes, like a child remembers a burn." Linda took Emma back upstairs. Victoria gathered her papers. "I don't want confrontation," she said quickly. "Just don't interfere with my rights." "Discuss it with my lawyer." Robert stood. "You have no rights here." Victoria's smile faltered. "Memory isn't always something to be proud of," Robert said quietly. She left, heels echoing hard. Robert called his lawyer immediately. "Prepare all documentation. Medical reports. Psychologist notes. Everything." He organized each paper: evidence of neglect, malnutrition, fear. Would you expose painful truths to protect someone you love? Upstairs, Emma couldn't sleep. "Mama came," she whispered to Linda. Down below, Robert sat at his desk. Day 102. Protecting her. Outside, Victoria's car idled in darkness. She made a phone call. "I need you to help me get everything back," she said coldly. The car pulled away, taillights disappearing into the hills. Next morning, Robert's phone rang. A woman claiming to be a welfare inspector requested Emma's files, security reported. His lawyer called next. Victoria filed a petition. She claims Emma's in an unsuitable environment. Robert's jaw tightened. She's testing her luck one last time. Have you ever fought for someone who couldn't fight for themselves? That morning, a reporter appeared. "Rumor is you're hiding your daughter." "I'm not hiding anyone," Robert said coldly. "I'm protecting her from people like you." By afternoon, blurry photos of Emma appeared online. Mogul's secret shame. Robert called his lawyer. "Find where Victoria's staying." "Who's helping her?" "Don't engage publicly," the lawyer advised. "It'll blow over." Robert looked at Emma in the garden, counting roses. "No, if necessary, I'll tell our story myself." "Would you share your most painful story to protect someone?" 2 days later, Robert invited journalist Sophia Leon for an interview. "Do you fear public misunderstanding?" Sophia asked. Robert smiled, watching Emma play. "She doesn't need pity. She needs to live like a girl with a father." "The mistakes were mine, not hers." The article, "Mogul Abandons Business to Learn How to Be a Father." It spread rapidly. Public opinion shifted. Thousands supported them. Emma's photo on the swing went viral. Every child deserves unconditional love. In her apartment, Victoria stared at her phone, stunned. Public opinion had turned completely. 3 days later, she called. "We need to talk." They met at a downtown cafe. Victoria wore sunglasses. "I never wanted to hurt Emma." "You call starvation not hurting?" Robert replied. He placed an envelope on the table. Inside, audio of Victoria saying, "Don't give her dinner. Let her look at the food." Victoria's face went pale. "Where did you—" "From someone who witnessed everything," Robert stood. "And the conscience I should have listened to earlier." "You don't understand. I saved your company." Victoria's voice rose. "And abused an 8-year-old in return," Robert said coldly. "You're not just manipulative. You're cruel." What would you say to someone justifying child abuse? He walked out. Rain began falling. People rushed past with umbrellas. Robert walked straight ahead, slow but sure. He stopped at a bookstore. Bought colored pencils. That night, Emma drew a man with an umbrella sheltering a small girl, rain all around. "Daddy, rain. But have umbrella," she said, showing him. Robert sat beside her, smiling. "That's right, Emma. We have an umbrella. We're not afraid anymore." She nodded, coloring the rain trails pale blue. Outside, real rain fell. A drop landed on the paper's edge, bleeding into the crayon line, softening into gentle gray dot, like all old sadnesses being washed away. 1 year after the rain, Los Angeles was immersed in vibrant spring. The air was fresh, trees whispered along the streets, and warm sunlight spread across the downtown plaza. Today marked the launch of Emma's Light Foundation, a project Robert Morgan founded to support children with Down syndrome and their families. Stage was set up in the center of the wide paved courtyard, surrounded by white and green flowers, Emma's favorite colors. Beneath a large banner reading, "Emma's Light. Every child deserves to shine." People gathered, the sound of conversation and laughter mixed with soft music playing through outdoor speakers. Robert stood center stage, microphone in hand. Beside him was Emma, now 9 years old. Her brown hair was adorned with white flowers. A bright blue dress fell to her knees. She gripped her father's hand tightly, her small fingers intertwined with his. "A year ago," Robert began, his voice warm and deep, "I never thought we could stand here today. I used to believe I could control everything with logic and money. But it turns out, some things can only be understood through love. Love it." He paused, looking at his daughter, who smiled up at him. "This foundation was created to help special children like my daughter to be seen, to be heard, and to live with their own joy." Thunderous applause swept the plaza. Several people wiped tears from their eyes. In the front row sat Linda, Emma's psychologist, and former employees of Morgan Financial, people who once only saw Robert in suits talking about numbers, now looking at him with completely different eyes. From afar, camera lenses focused on the stage. But the center of attention wasn't the man who was once a famous mogul. It was the little girl standing beside him. "What city are you watching this video from, and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video." Emma was slightly overwhelmed by the crowd. But then she pulled out a sheet of drawing paper from behind her back. She held it high, her voice slow and deliberate. "Hello, this is Emma's family." In the picture were 3 people holding hands, a man with brown hair, a woman with brown hair, and a little girl in a blue dress between them. Below, she'd scribbled in red crayon, "My family." The entire audience fell silent for a few seconds, then erupted in thunderous applause. Robert crouched down, adjusting the microphone for her, but Emma just shook her head, smiled, and pointed at the drawing, as if to say this was enough. A middle-aged woman in the audience gently held her son's hand. He too had Down syndrome. Tears ran down her face. Other children below waved at Emma. She responded with a round smile, slightly hesitant but brilliant. "Before we continue, please take a moment to leave a comment about this story and rate it from 1 to 10. How are you feeling? If there's anything you'd like to share, I'm always here to listen." After the ceremony, Robert descended from the stage, answering interviews. A reporter approached. "Mr. Morgan, do you regret ever hiding your daughter from the public?" Robert smiled faintly, his smile tinged with sadness. "Yes, I regret it. I was afraid others would look at her with pity. Now I just want the whole world to see how strong and radiant she is." The reporter nodded. Robert turned to look at Emma, who sat among a group of children, laughing as they gave her a heart-shaped balloon. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "Her light illuminated the darkness inside me too." Have you ever hidden something beautiful because you were afraid of judgment? What made you finally share it? That evening, father and daughter returned to the mansion. On the dining table sat a vase of white roses, the aroma of fresh baked goods floating sweetly through the air. The house was no longer empty like before. The walls were filled with Emma's drawings. The hallway was marked with her faint pink handprints. Robert walked through the living room, stopping before a framed photo taken at the ceremony. In it, Emma held her drawing, sunlight reflecting in her hair. And he stood beside her, eyes full of pride. He smiled, then went to his study. On the desk, the small journal still sat there, the journal he'd started the first day he relearned to be a father. The cover was worn, the edges slightly curled from a mix of coffee spills and tears. Robert opened the last page. Below the inscription, Day 365. He paused for a moment, then added, "She's no longer afraid. And I no longer forget." His pen stopped. He looked out the window. Outside, the garden lights shone brightly. The swing swayed gently with the wind. The rose bush bloomed fully, white petals trembling under the golden glow of the porch lamp. A small sound of laughter came from the adjoining room. "What's one thing you wish you could tell your younger self about what truly matters in life?" Robert stood, walked over, and gently pushed open the door. Emma sat on the carpet, fitting together pieces of a letter puzzle. When she connected the last 4 pieces, the word appeared clearly. Love-ye. She tilted her head, reading slowly, her voice small but clear. Love. Love. Robert leaned against the doorframe, smiling. "You did it very well, Emma." She looked up, her eyes bright. "Daddy also love?" He entered and sat beside her. "Yes, Daddy also loves Emma." She laughed, adding a flower shape beside the word. Then she carefully placed a glass of milk next to it, making sure not a single drop spilled. "Daddy, drink with me?" She offered the glass. Robert took it, drank a sip, then placed his hand on his daughter's head. "I remember the first time I saw you holding a glass of milk. Your hand trembled so much because you were afraid of spilling it." Emma nodded, then responded, "Now Emma not afraid." Robert smiled gently. "I know. When did someone you love finally feel safe enough to stop being afraid? How did that moment change you?" He gently pulled the blanket over her shoulders, sitting in silence for a few minutes to listen to her steady breathing. The room was bathed in the soft golden light of the night lamp, warm as honey. On the study desk, the last drawing was still unfinished, a house with a red roof. The door wide open, and outside, a blue sky and bright sun. Below the drawing, Emma had carefully written, "Home is where Daddy smiles." Robert read the inscription, his heart filled with inexpressible warmth. All the amendments, all the things he once feared, had transformed into a simple truth. Seeing his daughter at peace, and knowing she felt his love, he gently dimmed the lights, letting the room sink into a soft, golden glow. Before closing the door, he stopped, watched his daughter sleep, then smiled and whispered, "Good night, my little light." Outside, the Bel Air sky was clear. Stars shone like small luminous points, reflecting in the window glass. The light in the Morgan house still shone outward, soft and warm, illuminating the roses swaying in the breeze. But peace doesn't always last forever. 2 weeks after the foundation launch, Robert's phone rang early one morning. His lawyer's voice was urgent. "Robert, Victoria's legal team filed an emergency motion. They're claiming the foundation is using Emma for publicity without proper consent. They want a full custody evaluation." Robert set down his coffee cup slowly. "She won't give up. There's more," the lawyer continued. "They've hired a private investigator. Photos of Emma at the foundation event are being circulated with misleading captions, exploited for charity. Billionaire's PR stunt." Robert looked out the window where Emma was feeding birds in the garden, counting each one softly. 1, 2, 3. "Schedule a meeting with the judge," Robert said calmly. "And prepare Dr. Chen's testimony. Emma's therapist has documented everything. Have you ever had someone twist something beautiful into something ugly? How did you fight back?" That afternoon, Robert sat Emma down in the garden. "Emma, some people might ask you questions soon. About our house. About how Daddy takes care of you." Emma looked confused. "Questions?" "Yes, sweetheart. Just tell them the truth. Tell them how you feel. Can you do that?" Emma nodded slowly, then asked, "Daddy go away?" Robert's heart clenched. He knelt down, taking both her hands. "No, my love. Daddy's never going away again. I promise." She hugged him tightly, her small arms around his neck. "Emma not afraid. Daddy here." The custody evaluation was scheduled for the following week. A court-appointed child psychologist, Dr. Martinez, would visit the home and interview both Robert and Emma. The morning of the visit, Robert woke early. He didn't clean obsessively or hide Emma's messy drawings. Instead, he made pancakes, Emma's favorite, and they ate breakfast on the patio as usual. When Dr. Martinez arrived, a kind-looking woman in her 50s with warm eyes, Emma was watering flowers, singing softly to herself. "Mr. Morgan." Dr. Martinez extended her hand. "Thank you for having me." "Thank you for coming," Robert replied. "Emma, come say hello." Emma approached shyly, one hand behind her back. "Hello." "Hello, Emma. Those are beautiful flowers. Did you plant them?" Emma shook her head. "Daddy plant. Emma water. 1, 2, 3. She counted each rosebush. Dr. Martinez smiled. "You're a very good helper. What do you think makes a good parent? Is it perfection or something else entirely?" Over the next 3 hours, Dr. Martinez observed everything. She watched Robert help Emma with her schoolwork, never rushing, always patient. She saw Emma choose her own lunch peanut butter sandwich. Cut in triangles, not squares. Triangles better. "Daddy." She noticed the drawings covering the refrigerator. The small step stool Emma used to reach the sink. The well-worn storybooks on the shelf. During the private interview with Emma, Dr. Martinez asked, "Do you feel safe at home?" Emma nodded. "Daddy here." "Daddy not go away." "What do you do when you're scared?" "Tell Daddy." "Daddy stay." "What makes you happy?" Emma thought for a moment, then smiled. "Daddy smile." Emma smile. Flowers, milk not spill. Dr. Martinez made notes, her expression softening. Later, she interviewed Robert. "Mr. Morgan, why did you start the foundation?" "Because I failed my daughter for years," Robert said honestly. "I thought money and staff could replace love. I was wrong. The foundation exists so other parents don't make the same mistake I did, and so children like Emma know they're not alone. And if you're granted full custody, I'll continue doing what I'm doing now. Being her father. Not her manager, not her boss. Just her dad." 3 days later, the report arrived. Robert sat in his study, hands trembling as he opened the envelope. After comprehensive evaluation, "It is my professional opinion that Emma Morgan is thriving in her father's care. Mr. Robert Morgan has demonstrated exceptional commitment to understanding and meeting his daughter's unique needs. The home environment is loving, stable, and appropriately stimulating. I see no reason to alter the current custody arrangement. In fact, I would consider any disruption to Emma's current placement to be detrimental to her emotional and psychological well-being." Robert exhaled slowly, tears streaming down his face. He'd been holding his breath without realizing it. A small voice came from the doorway. "Daddy crying?" Emma stood there, her doll in one hand, the other reaching toward him. Robert quickly wiped his eyes. "Happy crying, sweetheart. Very happy crying." She walked over and patted his hand. "It's okay, Daddy. Emma here." He pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, you are. You're here. When was the last time you cried tears of relief?" What burden finally lifted? 2 months later, the final court hearing took place. Victoria attended with her legal team, dressed impeccably in navy blue. Her hair perfect. Robert arrived with Emma, who wore her favorite blue dress and carried a folder of drawings. The judge, a stern-looking woman named Judge Patterson, reviewed all the documents. Dr. Martinez's evaluation. Medical records showing Emma's improved health. Testimony from Linda. Even statements from neighbors who'd witnessed the transformation. Then she asked Emma to approach the bench. "Hello, Emma. I'm Judge Patterson." Do you know why you're here today? Emma nodded. Talk about home. That's right. Can you tell me about your home? Emma thought carefully. Home is where Daddy is. Daddy makes pancakes. Daddy reads stories. Daddy stays when Emma's scared. And do you want to stay with your daddy? Yes. Emma's voice was small but certain. Then she added, Daddy not go away. Daddy promise. Judge Patterson's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Thank you, Emma. You can go sit down now. Have you ever watched a child's simple truth cut through all the complicated lies? What happened? The judge turned to Victoria. Mrs. Hayes, you've alleged that Mr. Morgan is using Emma for publicity and that the home environment is unsuitable. However, every piece of evidence contradicts this. The child is healthy, happy, and thriving. What exactly are you hoping to achieve here? Victoria stood. Your Honor, I simply believe Emma would benefit from what? Judge Patterson interrupted. From being removed from the first stable, loving home she's known? From a father who quit his executive position to care for her full-time? From a therapeutic team that reports remarkable progress? Victoria's lawyer whispered something to her. She sat down, her jaw tight. Judge Patterson picked up her gavel. I've seen enough. Full custody is awarded to Robert Morgan. Miss Hayes, you are granted supervised visitation rights 1 Sunday per month, should Emma consent. This court finds that Mr. Morgan has not only met but exceeded his parental responsibilities. Case closed. The gavel struck. Robert closed his eyes, his hand finding Emma's. She squeezed back. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. But Robert walked past them, Emma's hand in his, saying nothing. He didn't need to. 6 months after the court victory, Emma's Light Foundation had grown beyond Robert's wildest expectations. 3 centers had opened across California, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego. Each center offered therapy, education, and family support for children with Down syndrome and other developmental differences. Robert had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Morgan Financial. Appointing a new CEO, he now spent mornings with Emma and afternoons at the foundation. One autumn afternoon, a new family arrived at the Ellis Center, a young mother named Sophia and her 4-year-old son. Daniel, who had Down syndrome. Sophia looked exhausted. Her eyes red from crying. I don't know what to do, she told Robert. Everyone says I should institutionalize him. That I can't handle this alone. Robert knelt down to Daniel's level. The boy was lining up toy cars, counting softly. Robert smiled, recognizing the behavior. My daughter used to do that, he said gently. Still does sometimes. Sophia's eyes widened. Your daughter? What would you say to a parent who's just been told their child is different? What do they need to hear most? Robert called Emma over. She'd been helping Linda set up art supplies. Emma, can you show Daniel the playroom? Emma took Daniel's hand without hesitation. Come, I show you. 1, 2, 3. She helped him count his cars before leading him away. Sophia watched. Tears streaming down her face again, but different tears this time. They told me he'd never connect with other children, she whispered. They told me a lot of things too, Robert said. Most of them were wrong. What Daniel needs is what every child needs: patience, love, and someone who sees his strengths, not just his challenges. He handed her a tissue. Stay for lunch. Meet some other families. You're not alone in this. Sophia nodded, unable to speak. That evening, Robert found Emma in the garden, talking to her flowers as she watered them. You did a good thing today, he said. Helping Daniel. Emma smiled. Daniel nice. He like cars. Emma like flowers. Different, okay. Robert felt his throat tighten. Yes, sweetheart. Different is okay. Different is beautiful. She hugged his leg, leaving a wet handprint from the watering can on his pants. He didn't mind at all. That winter, Emma turned 10. Robert organized a small party at the house, just close friends, foundation families, Linda, and a few children from Emma's therapy group. The living room was decorated with blue and white balloons. A cake shaped like a flower garden sat on the table. When it was time to blow out the candles, everyone gathered around. Emma closed her eyes tight, thinking hard about her wish. Then she blew, not quite getting all the candles. So Robert helped with the last two. Everyone cheered. "What did you wish for?" Linda asked. Emma thought for a moment, then said, "Already have. Daddy here. Friends here. Home here." The room fell silent. Several parents wiped their eyes. Robert hugged his daughter close. "You're right, sweetheart. We already have everything. What would you wish for if you already had everything that truly mattered?" Later that evening, after the guests left and Emma was in bed, Robert sat in his study with the journal. He'd filled 3 volumes now. He opened to a blank page and wrote, "Day 1095. 3 years. I used to measure success in dollars and deals closed. Now I measure it in smiles and daddy look moments. I used to fear Emma's differences. Now I celebrate them. I used to think I was teaching her. It turns out she's been teaching me all along. What is love? It's not grand gestures. It's showing up. It's staying. It's being present for the small moments that make up a life. Emma taught me that. My little light." He closed the journal, stood and walked to Emma's room. She was asleep, her doll tucked under one arm, a new drawing on the knitstand. He picked up the drawing. It showed 2 people on a swing, one big, one small, with a sun above them, and the words, "Happy forever." Robert kissed her forehead gently. "Happy forever, my love." 5 years later, Emma was 15. She attended a specialized school that Robert helped establish through the foundation, place where differences weren't deficits but strengths to be nurtured. She discovered a love for photography. Her pictures, often simple shots of flowers, hands, or light through windows, had a haunting beauty to them. Several had been featured in a gallery show. Seeing through Emma's eyes. Robert stood in the gallery, watching people examine his daughter's work. A photo of their hands together, watering plants, just their hands, water droplets catching the light. Another of her old rag doll, worn and loved, sitting on the swing. A young woman approached him. "Are you Emma's father?" "I am," Robert said proudly. "These photographs are extraordinary. She has a gift for finding beauty in simple moments." Robert smiled. "She's always had that gift. I was just too blind to see it for a long time." "What gift in someone you love did you almost miss because you were looking for something else?" Emma appeared beside him, camera around her neck. "Daddy, can we go home now?" "I'm tired." "Of course, sweetheart." In the car, Emma was quiet for a while, then said, "Daddy, you know what I remember most?" "What's that?" "The rain picture. When you bought me the colored pencils." Robert glanced at her, surprised she remembered. "That was a long time ago." "I know. But it was when I stopped being afraid. Because you were the umbrella." Robert had to pull over because his eyes blurred with tears. Emma reached over and patted his hand, the same gesture she'd made when she was small. "It's okay, Daddy. Happy crying." He laughed through his tears. "Yes, happy crying." On Emma's 18th birthday, Robert threw a large celebration at the foundation's main center. 200 people attended, families they'd helped, staff, donors, and friends. Emma, now a young woman, stood on stage in a blue dress, still her favorite color. Her hair was longer, but her eyes held the same gentle wonder. She'd prepared a speech with Linda's help. Robert stood in the audience, his heart pounding with pride and nervousness for her. Emma stepped to the microphone. The room fell silent. "Hello, my name is Emma Morgan." She paused, took a breath. "When I was little, I was very scared. The house was too quiet. I was always hungry. I had to be perfect." Robert's chest tightened. They'd discussed whether she should talk about this. She'd insisted. But then Daddy came home. He saw me, really saw me. And everything changed. She looked directly at her father. "Daddy taught me that being different is okay. That making mistakes is okay. That I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be Emma." Tears streamed down faces throughout the room. This foundation helps other kids who are scared, other parents who don't know what to do. It says, "You are not alone. You are loved. You are enough." She held up a photograph, the one of their hands watering plants together. "This is my favorite picture, because it shows what love looks like. Love is hands together. Love is staying. Love is teaching someone they don't have to be afraid anymore." The room erupted in applause. Robert couldn't see through his tears. Emma stepped down and walked straight to him. He wrapped her in his arms. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "I know, Daddy. I know." "What's the bravest thing you've ever watched someone do? How did it change you?" That night, back at home, Robert and Emma sat on the porch swing he'd built all those years ago. The stars were brilliant above Bel Air. "Daddy," Emma said quietly, "do you ever think about her?" "Victoria?" Robert was surprised. They rarely spoke about her. "Sometimes." "Do you?" Emma nodded. "I forgave her." "You did?" "Yes, Linda helped me. She said forgiveness isn't saying what she did was okay. It's saying I won't let it hurt me anymore." Emma looked at her father. "Are you angry I forgave her?" Robert pulled her close. "No, sweetheart. I'm amazed by you. You're far wiser than I'll ever be." They sat in comfortable silence, the swing creaking gently. "Daddy?" "Yes?" "Thank you for coming home that night. Thank you for staying." Robert kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for teaching me what truly matters." The porch light glowed softly, illuminating the garden where roses bloomed year after year. Inside the house, every wall held Emma's artwork drawings, paintings, photographs. A timeline of healing. A gallery of love. Who taught you what love really means? Have you told them? 25 years after that terrible night in the kitchen, Robert Morgan stood at Emma's wedding. She was 33 now, marrying Michael, a kind man who worked as a teacher at the specialized school. He saw Emma for exactly who she was and loved her completely. The ceremony took place in the garden of the Bel Air mansion. Under the same trees where they'd watered plants together so many years ago. Emma wore a blue dress, of course, with white roses in her hair. When it was time for the father-daughter dance, the DJ played "What a Wonderful World." Robert took Emma's hand, and they swayed gently to the music. "I'm not going far, Daddy," she said. "Michael and I found a house just 10 minutes away." "I know. But you're still leaving." His voice caught. "No," Emma said firmly. "I'm growing." "That's different. You taught me that." Robert smiled through tears. "When did you become so wise?" "I had a good teacher." As they danced, Robert saw their whole journey flash before his eyes. The terrified little girl on the kitchen floor. The first breakfast together. The watering can. The swing. The drawings. The court battle. The foundation. Every moment had led to this. "Emma," he said softly, "of all the things I've accomplished in my life, the businesses, the money, the success, you are my greatest achievement. Not because I made you perfect, but because I finally learned to love you perfectly as you are." Emma hugged him tight. "And you are mine, Daddy. You're my greatest achievement too." "What's the greatest thing you've ever built?" "Was it something you could touch, or something you couldn't?" That night, after the celebration ended and Emma and Michael had left for their honeymoon, Robert returned to the quiet mansion. He walked through the rooms, touching the picture frames, the artwork, the memories embedded in every corner in his study. The journals lined an entire shelf, now 15 years of entries. He pulled down the first one and opened to that initial entry. Day 1. Learning to be a father again. Then he took out the latest volume and wrote, Day 5475, 15 years. Today my daughter got married. I walked her down the aisle, and when the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman?" I said, "Her mother and I do. Sarah would be so proud of the woman Emma's become." I finally am too. I used to think the story was about saving Emma, but really, she saved me. She taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. That strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. That success isn't measured in dollars, but in moments of connection. The little girl who once licked milk off the floor in terror now photographs beauty for a living. She speaks at conferences. She advocates for others like her. She loves and is loved, and me? I'm just her dad. And that's the greatest title I'll ever hold. Thank you, Emma. For everything. Love. Daddy. He closed the journal and looked out the window. The garden lights illuminated the swing. Still there after all these years. The roses bloomed eternal. And in the distance, he could almost hear the sound of a little girl's laughter. Counting. 1, 2, 3. Robert smiled. Life, it turned out, wasn't about control or perfection or success. It was about this, showing up, staying present, and loving without condition. Everything else was just noise. And what about you? What's your story? What little light in your life are you learning to truly see? Thank you for watching Emma and Robert's journey. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, every child, every person deserves to be loved exactly as they are. What was the moment in this story that moved you most? Please share in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories inspire me. Subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Because sometimes, we all need to be reminded to truly see the people we love.